Hello everybody, and welcome to the UK Skype under control. I greet you all from whichever part of the globe you hail from. I'll start by handing the mic over to Pearce.
Hiya, Kevin. Yes, hiya, everybody. Yeah, nothing to share really this week, except that I was walking my dogs Wednesday night, me and Mia, and just got to the top of the street coming home. And yeah, Mia said, "Look, Dad, what's that?" So we looked up, both looked at it, and it was a UFO. But that's it. But yeah, I watched it for a good, well, until it went out of view. So I went out of my view. So I bet it was a good 6-7 minutes because it was travelling really slowly. And I walked down the street, walked into my house, and walked straight out in the back garden, seeing it again. Seeing it was there, and seeing it was just moving slow. And sang the new sound, sang the new you up here, and it just like the last time, it glowed up. It kind of like not lit up the old sky, but there was a definite glow off it. But it just continued on its route until it went out of my view, until it went over the horizon. And yeah, that was it. That's all I've got to share this week. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Dwayne, and new friends. Yeah, that's it. Thanks. Cheers, mate, Kev. So it was pretty awesome seeing the UFO. And it's like when I sang the new sound like it this time and the previous time, it's like it's recognising it because it's slowing up. I don't know if it does doing it for me. It's like saying, yeah, new you, back to you, or just that it's recognising it or what. But yeah, there's definitely a glow. When I've seen it, I think it's the same craft, and I've seen it twice now in the past few months. And yeah, when I sing the new sound directly to it with my intent and that, it just the graph, because it's like an orb. It's like a big orb. And it's moving. It was moving really slow this time. That's why we recognise it straight away. And yeah, it glowed up more so when I sang the new sound at it. Yeah, that was it. Thank you, Kevin.
Hello, Pearce. It's Dwayne here. Thank you. And yes, could understand you better when you kids just speak, very calmly and slowly. Thank you very much. And yes, how exciting. We know what's going on here with that in the Galaxy Project, don't we? So more on that later, but thank you so much. Yes, it's getting more real, etc. So yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
I found myself in a large building on the real side. It was very vast and multi-layered, with many rooms, corridors, and complexity of layout. The decor was rather bland. Everything was white in colour, and no furniture did I see. I worked my way along a corridor, and coming from the other end of it was a female. She glided across the floor, seeming almost to float, rather apparitional in her motion, but solid enough at the same time. She seemed very pleased with herself, and smiling at me, she would reveal that she was the influence. No other conversation was had, as she floated past me and disappeared around the corner. I would say this was my first ever encounter with the influence, as far as my personal self knew, assuming it was actually she and not a ruse, a mimicry, or an entity playing a game. I've found that as I go about my real side experiences, I build a kind of impression recognitional catalogue of individuals, and learn the subtle differences between individuals. Guides have a very distinct presence about them, due to their advanced state of awareness, as an example. And then subsequent encounters with guides will allow me to realize who they are, despite the forms they may adopt, as they still exude this awareness, this all is real aliveness impression, you might say. Usually then, I go by my impression of an individual on the real side, more so than what they are doing or presenting themselves as. This would be my real awareness, seeing through the surface of the experience, beyond the literal front that the personal self could not see beyond. With this female, I had little impression of anything, no real malice or ill intent. She just seemed to exude a cheery, self-satisfied, carefree attitude. But as I said, now I've catalogued the sense of her, I may well discern her again in future experiences, if she assumes other forms and doesn't reveal her identity in them. Anyway, seems the impression of what I was doing was becoming known to me. My real self divulging informations to my personal self, which isn't always the case. As often, the real self does what it does, and the personal self is along for the ride, not exactly knowing what's going on or why, and then must try and piece it together on waking for its demonstrations, comparisons, and views. Seems here I was on a mission to rescue an individual or other, and I knew where I must go to achieve this. Well, my real me did anyway. This individual was secured in this building, and it was a domain of vampires. Why couldn't people get captured by more ordinary individuals? Would certainly make rescue easier. I crept into a room, and there were 3 vampiric fellows lined along the furthest wall. It seemed they couldn't see me, for whatever reasons, and I knew that proximity was keeping me from being discovered, even though I could see them, and the room was completely open. Nevertheless, I tried to negotiate a way through the room to the only other door other than the one I'd entered that would allow me to work my way further into this building. Alas, I was spotted and was beset upon by the vampires, and then the scene faded away. Now I was in another place, a large warehouse or underground affair with dim lighting. There were a great multitude of people, and all were lined up in columns, as though they were a form of military outfit. I was amongst these individuals, but observing myself from a bird's eye view, hovering above the gathering. It seemed to be some kind of vampire recruiting situation. All these individuals were here to assume their new positions as vampires, and I had the impression it was all a very voluntary affair. All these peoples had agreed to their soon-to-be vampirization without threat, force, or coercion. It was simply an option, presented for what it was, and readily accepted. There were a few actual vampires at the head of this gathering, keeping order and speaking some words. They would then announce the arrival of the head vampire. A hushed silence fell upon the peoples, and then this gigantic creature shuffled through the lines of individuals. He was purple in colour, robed and hunched over, though carried an air of authority and charisma. He must have been the size of a house in comparison to the people here, and they had to make space for his passage through the congregation. The scene switched again, and I was in this car as an apprentice vampire, as was my impression. But I wasn't at all vampiric. I seemed very much my usual self, and it was also daytime. Perhaps this notion of daylight being detrimental to vampires was a myth, because in the car with me were 3 actual vampires, and it was as though I was in their protection, care, and under their wing, so to speak. It was an ongoing training, continuing from the underground gathering of earlier, and seemed to involve a lot of literal information. Also, the discussion was about the recruiting of others to add to the vampire ranks, along the lines of handing out leaflets and the like. So it was all very blatant and apparent, nothing sneaky, underhand, or clandestine. Seems the presence of the vampires was accepted and acceptable, and openly advertised as a choice. At this moment, I was feeling somewhat shifty about this situation. I had the sense that there were very few options at this time, and this one seemed the most feasible. But then I had the strong sense of how I'd rather promote the new presentation and the ease, as that made sense, and anything else, including this vampire stuff, was all creational ideas and nonsense. As I considered this, I would reach out with my awareness, and was dismayed to discover that there was no new presentation here. There was no opportunity available, or any means by which one might get on their process of ears recognition. And yet, even as I was in this experience and having this view, I had this agitation that I ought be going about the purpose of becoming more aware and sharing and presenting the true reality. It was rather curious. My personal self was locked into the experience, and having only created ideas available to it, and yet a part of me was aware of the ease and the necessity to share it. It was the sort of real side experience you have where, for whatever reason, you are diminished and contained within the parameters of it, for whatever demonstrational purpose it serves. At least this scene of it anyway. Almost like a completely personal dream, with the connection to the real self severed momentarily. Seems as though there was an overlap. The personal self-dream and the real self and its real intent is recognizing objective, rather a demonstration of how everything is an isness, and this isness is always present in every moment and everywhere. It's just that the awareness can be housed in creational situations and positions in life other than this universal state of standing with the ears. And yet, regardless of where we are, the ears is always a recognitional step away. Wherever this place or dimension was in this real side experience, it suggested that once the real you has decided its want to recognize the ears, the possibility of it seeping through the cracks of our created consciousness experience is a likelihood. But then, in such situations, would the personal self recognize what's going on without references and information? For here I had access to the references of the new presentation, and yet no new presentation or any presentation of the ears was available in this world. Without the references, the personal self would have quite the time recognizing the true light of the ears if it entered their creational experience. But perhaps, should one say, return into a future life in another dimension or place in creation after this one, having prior lifetime knowledge of the ears through the new presentation's material, maybe the real you can place the information stored in the causal body into the mind of the individual, much to the confusion of the personal self, I'm sure. Maybe having had the connection to the TruLight Reality in a prior lifetime, in which the real intent was firm and maintained, but for whatever reason the individual finds themselves back in creation again, perhaps with no presentation available anymore, the guides may work more directly with this sincere person and with the real self, and beam information, impressions, and new presentation references straight into the personal self's awareness. On this occasion, the information was indeed placed with the personal self, and it would agitate it as the experience continued.